What if one of history's most devastating volcanic eruptions not only destroyed a thriving civilization, but also inspired one of the greatest legends of all time, the lost city of Atlantis? Welcome to Armchair Archaeology, where we uncover the mysteries of ancient history. Today, we'll explore the catastrophic eruption of the Santorini volcano and how it contributed to the sudden collapse of the powerful Minoan civilization in the 16th century BCE. We'll also dive into the long-lasting impact of this event, from tsunamis to climate change, and uncover how this disaster echoed across the ancient world. Stick around until the end, where we'll reveal an intriguing new connection between the Minoans and the myth of Atlantis that might surprise you. The Minoan civilization was a Bronze Age marvel, flourishing on the island of Crete from around 3000 to 1400 BCE. They were pioneers in architecture, art, and trade, shaping the ancient Mediterranean world with their influence. The Minoans built elaborate palaces, the most famous being Knossos, a labyrinthine structure that served as the political and religious center of their society. This palace is renowned for its advanced engineering, including running water, drainage systems, and beautifully decorated halls adorned with frescoes depicting vibrant scenes of nature, marine life, and religious rituals. The Minoans were masterful traders, connecting the dots between Egypt, the Near East, and the Aegean. Their ships carried goods like olive oil, pottery, and luxury items across the seas, establishing them as a key economic power. What's intriguing is that, unlike many other ancient civilizations, the Minoans didn't emphasize military conquest. They thrived on commerce and diplomacy. Religion was central to Minoan culture, with evidence pointing to the worship of goddesses and the frequent use of bull imagery in their rituals. Their art reflects a deep connection to nature, featuring plants, animals, and symbolic representations of their spiritual world. However, despite their achievements, the Minoans are shrouded in mystery. We still haven't fully deciphered their language, Linear A, leaving many questions about their society unanswered. The Minoan world would face an unexpected and catastrophic blow around 1600 BCE when a volcanic eruption on the nearby island of Santorini unleashed chaos that would forever alter their future. Santorini, or ancient Thera, sat like a ticking time bomb in the Aegean Sea. Around 1600 BCE, it erupted in one of the largest volcanic events in recorded history, sending shockwaves across the Mediterranean. The eruption is thought to have unleashed energy equivalent to multiple atomic bombs, and its effects were catastrophic, both for the island itself and for surrounding regions, including the thriving Minoan civilization on Crete. The eruption occurred in stages. It likely began with severe earthquakes that rattled the island, signaling the volcano's awakening. These tremors might have caused inhabitants of Thera to flee, as no human remains have been found in the ash-covered ruins. The final explosion, however, was devastating. It blew the island apart, sending volcanic ash and pumice high into the atmosphere, creating a massive column of ash that darkened the skies for days. The most destructive force, however, was not just the ash, but the tsunamis that followed. When the volcano collapsed, it displaced the sea, creating massive waves that radiated outward. These tsunamis, some over 100 feet tall, slammed into the northern coast of Crete, causing massive destruction. The Minoans, though not directly on Santorini, were heavily impacted as their major ports and coastal cities were destroyed. The volcanic clouds spread across the Mediterranean, blocking sunlight and affecting the climate for years to come. This event, while immediate in its destruction, would have far-reaching consequences for the Minoans as they struggled to recover from the environmental and economic fallout. The immediate aftermath of the Santorini eruption brought chaos to the Minoan world. The series of tsunamis generated by the collapse of the island's volcanic caldera destroyed the northern coastal cities of Crete, where much of Minoan trade and communication took place. These coastal ports were vital to their economy, serving as hubs for the export of pottery, olive oil, and other goods that had made the Minoans wealthy and influential throughout the Mediterranean. The tsunamis weren't the only challenge. The eruption also created an ash cloud that blanketed parts of Crete and other areas of the eastern Mediterranean. The fallout of ash would have made large swaths of farmland unusable, covering crops and poisoning the soil. For a civilization heavily dependent on agriculture, this sudden loss of food production would have led to shortages and social unrest. The Minoans, who had once been able to trade for any necessary resources, were now cut off from their lifelines due to the destruction of their ports. The psychological impact of these events cannot be underestimated. Ancient societies often viewed natural disasters as signs of divine displeasure, and the destruction of temples and palaces by ash and quakes might have led the Minoans to question their relationship with the gods. As they struggled to recover from the ashfall and tsunamis, the Minoans faced a new challenge: how to maintain their society amid a landscape of ruin. But was the eruption alone enough to spell the end of the Minoan world, or did it only weaken them for what came next? The initial destruction caused by the Santorini eruption was only the beginning. In the long term, the disaster sent ripples through every aspect of Minoan society, accelerating their decline. Before the eruption, the Minoans relied heavily on their coastal trade networks, which connected them to Egypt, Anatolia, and other Mediterranean powers. With these ports destroyed by tsunamis, their ability to trade was crippled. The loss of maritime commerce meant a collapse in the economic lifelines that had sustained the Minoan elite, who relied on these connections for luxury goods and resources that couldn't be produced on Crete. The destruction of fertile farmland by volcanic ash also created a major agricultural crisis. Crete's rich soil, once supporting the production of olives, wine, and grains, was now poisoned by ash. Crop failures would have led to food shortages, further destabilizing Minoan society. With fewer resources to distribute, the centralized power of the palaces, like Knossos, began to weaken. The palatial economy, which depended on the collection and redistribution of goods, couldn't function without the flow of trade and agriculture. Religiously and culturally, the Minoans may have been deeply affected by the devastation. Temples and religious sites were damaged, and the sheer scale of the disaster might have shaken their faith in their gods, who were closely tied to nature. Social unrest likely followed, as communities faced famine and economic breakdown. Over time, these vulnerabilities made the Minoans susceptible to external pressures. Their weakened state would open the door for their eventual conquest by the Mycenaeans, who, within a century, would take control of Crete and usher in a new era. As the Minoans struggled to rebuild after the Santorini eruption, a new power was rising in mainland Greece: the Mycenaeans. By around 1450 BCE, the Mycenaeans, a warrior culture known for their militaristic society, began to dominate the Aegean region. Their interest in Crete was clear. The island was a valuable asset, strategically positioned for trade and rich in resources. However, the Minoans were no longer the powerful force they had been before the eruption. Their weakened economy and social structure made them vulnerable to external threats. Archaeological evidence suggests that the Mycenaean takeover of Crete was gradual rather than the result of a large-scale military invasion. The Mycenaeans likely established themselves first through trade and diplomacy, gradually gaining control of key Minoan centers like Knossos. By the mid-15th century BCE, the Mycenaeans had taken over the island, integrating much of Minoan culture into their own. Linear B, the Mycenaean script, evolved from the Minoan Linear A, and Minoan religious practices, such as the worship of goddesses, were adapted into the Mycenaean pantheon. Despite this blending of cultures, the Mycenaean presence marked the end of Minoan political independence. Crete was now part of a larger Mycenaean world, with its palaces repurposed to serve new rulers. The Minoans, once dominant in trade and cultural influence, had been reduced to a society under foreign control. The Mycenaeans, in contrast, flourished for a time, but their dominance would also eventually crumble, leading to the collapse of the Bronze Age civilizations across the Aegean. The Minoan decline was not immediate, but it was the eruption of Santorini that set the stage for their fall. The true scale of the Santorini eruption and its impact on the Minoan civilization has been revealed through archaeological discoveries over the last century. One of the most important sites is Crete, a Minoan settlement on Santorini itself. Buried under layers of volcanic ash, Crete is often called the Pompeii of the Aegean for its extraordinary preservation. Excavations have uncovered multi-story buildings, colorful frescoes, pottery, and everyday items frozen in time by the eruption. Interestingly, no human remains have been found in the ruins, suggesting that the inhabitants had warning of the eruption and evacuated before the final catastrophe. On Crete, archaeological evidence also points to the destruction caused by the eruption. Coastal settlements, particularly along the northern shore, bear signs of being hit by tsunamis, with debris and damage consistent with large waves crashing into these cities. The Palace of Knossos, the cultural heart of the Minoan world, shows signs of earthquake damage, and layers of ash found at the site further link the eruption to the island's turmoil. In addition to these physical clues, scientists have used radiocarbon dating to narrow down the eruption's timing, placing it around 1600 BCE. Studies of ice cores from Greenland and tree rings from Europe have provided evidence of a sudden, short-term climate change around this time, likely caused by the eruption's ash cloud, blocking out sunlight and reducing temperatures. This climate disruption would have compounded the challenges faced by the Minoans, contributing to crop failures and food shortages across the Mediterranean. Together, these archaeological and scientific findings give us a clearer picture of the magnitude of the Santorini eruption and its role in reshaping the ancient world. But could this very disaster have sparked one of history's most enduring legends? The story of Atlantis, first told by the Greek philosopher Plato, describes a highly advanced civilization that was swallowed by the sea in a single day and night of catastrophe. For centuries, scholars and enthusiasts alike have debated whether Atlantis was a real place or simply a metaphor. However, one of the most compelling theories suggests that Plato's tale may have been inspired by the real-life destruction of Santorini and the collapse of the Minoan civilization. Plato's Atlantis was described as an island empire, rich in culture and wealth, with great maritime power. This description closely mirrors what we know of the Minoans, who were sophisticated traders, seafarers, and builders, with impressive palaces and advanced technology. The sudden destruction of Atlantis, engulfed by the sea, parallels the events following the Santorini eruption. The massive tsunamis and the collapse of the island into the caldera could have been remembered in Greek oral tradition, eventually evolving into the myth of a lost island civilization. Plato places Atlantis beyond the Pillars of Hercules, the Strait of Gibraltar, but many scholars argue that this might not have been meant literally. It could have referred to a distant place in the Greek imagination, rather than a specific location in the Atlantic Ocean. Over time, the memory of the Santorini disaster, with its sudden and violent destruction, may have transformed into the legend of Atlantis, passed down through generations until Plato recorded it centuries later. While the true origin of the Atlantis story remains a mystery, the striking similarities between the myth and the historical eruption of Santorini suggest a fascinating possibility that the real-life destruction of a powerful civilization inspired one of the world's most enduring legends. In recent decades, scientists have made significant advances in understanding the scale and impact of the Santorini eruption. By studying the geological layers of ash and pumice left behind on the island, geologists have been able to reconstruct the sequence of events. The eruption was a multi-phase disaster, beginning with intense earthquakes and smaller eruptions before the main explosion occurred, collapsing the center of the island into the sea and creating the caldera we see today. One of the most remarkable findings is that the volcanic ash from the eruption spread far beyond the Mediterranean. Ice cores from Greenland contain traces of this ash, showing that the eruption had a global reach, affecting climates far beyond the Aegean. Even more surprisingly, ancient records from China describe unusual weather patterns, darkened skies, and colder temperatures around the time of the eruption. This suggests that ash from the Santorini eruption may have reached as far as East Asia, demonstrating the enormous scale of this event. Scientists have also used computer simulations to understand how the tsunamis generated by the eruption affected the surrounding regions. These models show that massive waves radiated out from Santorini, striking Crete, Cyprus, and even parts of the Egyptian coast. This helps explain the widespread destruction recorded in the archaeological record. Today, the Santorini volcano is still active, though it has not erupted on the same scale since the Bronze Age. Geologists closely monitor the region using modern technology such as GPS and satellite imagery to track any signs of renewed activity. Understanding the past is crucial not only for piecing together ancient history, but also for preparing for the possibility of future volcanic events. The eruption of Santorini may have been one of the earliest examples of how a natural disaster can trigger widespread climate change with far-reaching consequences. The ash cloud generated by the eruption was so massive that it not only disrupted the local environment, but may have affected global weather patterns. When large quantities of ash and sulfur dioxide are released into the atmosphere, they reflect sunlight away from the Earth, leading to a period of cooling known as a volcanic winter. Evidence from ice cores and tree rings indicates that temperatures dropped for several years following the eruption. This cooling would have shortened growing seasons and led to poor harvests, particularly in regions already prone to drought. Crop failures would have caused food shortages, destabilizing societies dependent on agriculture. In Crete, the impact on farming would have been devastating, as ash covered much of the fertile land, rendering it useless for years. Beyond the Minoans, other civilizations in the eastern Mediterranean, including Egypt and the Hittites, may have experienced similar disruptions. There is evidence that many Bronze Age societies around this time faced sudden declines or collapses, possibly linked to the environmental stresses caused by the eruption. Some researchers suggest that the Santorini eruption may have contributed to the broader Bronze Age collapse, a period of social and political upheaval across the Mediterranean that saw the fall of several major empires. While it's unlikely that the Santorini eruption alone caused this collapse, it may have been a significant factor, triggering a chain reaction of environmental, economic, and social crises that reshaped the ancient world. The Santorini volcano remains active, and although a massive eruption like the one that devastated the Minoan civilization is unlikely in the near future, it is not impossible. The island lies on a tectonic boundary where the African plate is being forced beneath the Eurasian plate, a process that fuels volcanic activity throughout the Aegean. Though eruptions have occurred since the Bronze Age, none have approached the scale of the 1600 BCE disaster. The most recent volcanic activity occurred in the early 20th century, with minor eruptions in 1925, 1939, and 1950. More recently, in 2011-2012, geologists detected increased seismic activity and ground deformation, suggesting that magma was building beneath the surface. While this didn't result in a major eruption, it served as a reminder that Santorini's volcanic system is still active and must be closely monitored. Today, modern technology allows scientists to keep a constant watch on the island. Seismographs, GPS measurements, and satellite data track any signs of volcanic activity, giving early warning if another eruption is imminent. This technology means that, unlike the Minoans, modern inhabitants of Santorini and nearby regions would likely have time to evacuate and prepare for such an event. Though the chances of another eruption of this scale are low, the Santorini volcano remains a powerful reminder of nature's ability to reshape civilizations. By studying the past, we can better understand how to protect ourselves in the future. Santorini may be quiet now, but it's always worth remembering that the forces that created one of history's most dramatic eruptions are still at play beneath the surface. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the eruption of Santorini and the fall of the Minoan civilization. We've explored how this catastrophic event reshaped the ancient Mediterranean and possibly even inspired the myth of Atlantis. But here's the surprise we promised. While Plato's story of Atlantis is often seen as a legend, many scholars believe the parallels between Atlantis and the Minoans are more than coincidence. Plato described Atlantis as a society that flourished in an era of peace with advanced architecture and great maritime power, all key aspects of Minoan culture. Even more intriguingly, the timing of Atlantis's destruction in Plato's account closely aligns with the period when the Minoans vanished. Could it be that Plato's Atlantis was a reflection of the real-life Minoan civilization whose sudden collapse left a deep impression on the ancient Greek imagination? While we may never know for certain, this enduring connection between the Minoans and Atlantis remains one of history's most fascinating mysteries. If you found this exploration captivating, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to Armchair Archaeology. What do you think? Could the eruption of Santorini have truly inspired the legend of Atlantis? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and tell us what other ancient mysteries you'd like us to dive into next. Be sure to hit the notification bell so you never miss our next deep dive into history's enigmas. Until then, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep the flame of curiosity burning bright.